Hello, 8th graders. It's Thursday, and we're back to reading The Book Thief. Chapter is Way of the Words. It happened in the small town of Hitler's heartland. The flow of more suffering was pumped nicely out, and a small piece of it had now arrived. Jews were being marched through the outskirts of Munich, and one teenage girl somehow did the unthinkable and made her way through to walk with them. When the soldiers pulled her away and threw her to the ground, and she stood up again, she continued. The morning was warm, another beautiful day for a parade. The soldiers and Jews made their way through several towns and were arriving now in Molchin. It was possible that more work needed to be done in the camp, or several prisoners had died. Whatever the reason, the new batch of fresh, tired Jews was being taken on foot to Dachau. As she always did, Liesel ran to Munich Street with the usual band of onlookers. Heil Hitler! She could hear the first soldier from far up the road and made her way toward him through the crowd to meet the procession. The voice amazed her. It made the endless sky into a ceiling just above his head, and the words bounced back, landing somewhere on the floor of limping Jewish feet. Their eyes, they watched the moving street one by one, and when Liesel found a good vantage point, she stopped and studied them. She raced through the files of face after face, trying to match them to the Jew who wrote The Standover Man and The Word Shaker. Feathery hair, she thought. No, hair like twigs. That's what it looks like when it hasn't been washed. Look out for hair like twigs and swampy eyes and a kindling beard. God, there were so many of them. So many sets of dying eyes and scuffling feet. Liesel searched them, and it was not so much a recognition of facial features that gave Max Vandenberg away. It was how the face was acting, also studying the crowd. Fixed in concentration, Liesel felt herself pausing as she found the only face looking directly into the German spectators. It examined them with such purpose that people on either side of the book thief noticed and pointed him out. What's he looking at? Said a male voice at her side. The book thief stepped onto the road. Never had movement been such a burden. Never had a heart been so definite and big in her adolescent chest. She stepped forward and said very quietly, He's looking for me. Her voice trailed off and fell away inside. She had to refind it, reaching far down to learn to speak again and call out his name. Max. I'm here, Max. Louder. Max, I'm here. He heard her. Max Vandenberg, August 1943. There were twigs of hair just like Liesel thought, and the swampy eyes stepped across, shoulder to shoulder over the other Jews. When they reached her, they pleaded. His beard stroked down his face, and his mouth shivered as he said the word, the name, the girl, Liesel. Liesel shrugged away entirely from the crowd and entered the tide of Jews, weaving through them till she grabbed hold of his arm with her left hand. His face fell on her. It reached down as she tripped, and the Jew, the nasty Jew, helped her up. It took all of his strength. I'm here, Max, she said again. I'm here. I can't believe. The words dripped from Max Vandenberg's mouth. Look how much you've grown. There was an intense sadness in his eyes. They swelled. Liesel, they got me a few months ago. The voice was crippled, but it dragged itself toward her. Halfway to Stuttgart. From the inside, the stream of Jews was a murky disaster of arms and legs, ragged uniforms. No soldier had seen her yet, and Max gave her a warning. You have to let go of me, Liesel. He even tried to push her away, but the girl was too strong. Max's starving arms could not sway her, and she walked on between the filth, the hunger, and confusion. After a long line of steps, the first soldier noticed. Hey, he called in. He pointed with his whip. Hey, girl, what are you doing? Get out of there. When she ignored him completely, the soldier used his arm to separate the stickiness of people. He shoved them aside and made his way through. He loomed above her as Liesel struggled on and noticed the strangled expression on Max Vandenberg's face. She had seen him afraid, but never like this. The soldier took her. His hands manhandled her clothes. She could feel the bones in his fingers and the ball of each knuckle. They tore at her skin. I said, get out, he ordered her. And now he dragged the girl to the side and flung her into the wall of onlooking Germans. It was getting warmer. The sun burned her face. The girl had landed sprawling with pain, but now she stood again. She recovered and waited. She re entered. This time, Liesel made her way through from the back. Ahead, she could just see the distinct twigs of hair and walked again toward them. This time, she did not reach out. She stopped. Somewhere inside her were the souls of words. They climbed out and stood beside her. Max, she said. He turned and briefly closed his eyes as the girl continued. There was once a strange small man, she said. Her arms were loose, but her hands were fists at her side. But there was a word shaker, too. One of the Jews on his way to Dachau had stopped walking now. He stood absolutely still as the others swerved morosely around him, leaving him completely alone. His eyes staggered, and it was so simple. The words were given across from the girl to the Jew. It climbed onto him. The next time she spoke, the questions stumbled from her mouth. Hot tears fraught for room in her eyes as she would not let them out. Better to stand resolute and proud. Let the words do all of it. Is it really you? The young man asked. She said. Is it from your cheek that I took the seed? Max Vandenberg remained standing. He did not drop to his knees. People and Jews and clouds all stopped. They watched. As he stood, Max looked first at the girl and then stared directly into the sky, who was wide and blue and magnificent. There were heavy beams, planks of sun, falling randomly, wonderfully to the road. Clouds arched their backs to look behind as they started again to move on. It's such a beautiful day, he said, and his voice was in many pieces. A great day to die. A great day to die. Like this. Lisa walked at him. She was courageous enough to reach out and hold his bearded face. Is it really you, Max? Such a brilliant German day, and its attentive crowd. He let his mouth kiss her palm. Yes, Liesel, it's me. And he held the girl's hand in his face and cried onto her fingers. He cried as the soldiers came, and a small collection of insolent Jews stood and watched. Standing, he was whipped. Max! The girl wept. Then silently, as she was dragged away, Max! Jewish fist fighter. Inside, she said all of it. Maxi Taxi. That's what the friend called you in Stuttgart when you fought on the street, remember? Remember, Max? You told me. I remember everything. That was you, the boy with the hammered fists. And you said you would land a punch on Death's face when he came for you. Remember the snowman, Max? Remember in the basement? Remember the white cloud with the gray heart? The Fuhrer still comes down looking for you sometimes. He misses you. We all miss you. The whip. The whip. The whip continued from the soldier's hand. It landed on Max's face. It clipped his chin and carved his throat. Max hit the ground, and the soldier now turned to the girl. His mouth opened. He had immaculate teeth. A sudden flash came before her eyes. She recalled the day she'd wanted Ilsa Herman, or at least the reliable Rosa, to slap her, but neither of them would do it. On this occasion, she was not let down. The whip sliced her collarbone and reached across her shoulder blade. Liesel! She knew that person. As the soldier swung his arm, she caught sight of a distressed Rudy Steiner in the gaps of the crowd. He was calling out. She could see his tortured face and yellowed hair. Liesel, get out of there! The book thief did not get out. She closed her eyes and caught the next burning streak, and another, till her body hit the warm flooring of the road. It heated her cheek. More words arrived, this time from the soldier. Stay up! The economical sentence was directed not to the girl, but the Jew. It was elaborated on. Get up, you dirty asshole. You Jewish whore. Dog. Get up. Get up. Max hoisted himself upright. Just another push-up, Max. Just another push-up on the cold basement floor. His feet moved. They dragged, and he traveled on. His legs staggered, and his hands wiped at the marks of the whip to soothe the stinging. When he tried to look again for Liesel, the soldier's hands were placed upon his bloodied shoulders and pushed. The boy arrived, his lanky legs crouched, and he called over to his left. Tommy, get out of here and help me. We have to get her up. Tommy, hurry. He lifted the book thief by the armpits. Liesel, come on. You have to get off the road. When she was able to stand, she looked at the shocked, frozen-faced Germans, fresh out of their packets. At their feet, she allowed herself to collapse, but only momentarily. A graze struck a match on the side of her face, where she'd met the ground. Her pulse flipped it over, frying it on both sides. Far down the road, she could see the blurry legs and heels of the last walking Jew. Her face was burning, and there was a dogged ache in her arms and legs, a numbness that was simultaneously painful and exhausting. She stood one last time. Waywardly, she began to walk and then run down Munich Street to haul in the last steps of Max Vandenberg. Liesel, what are you doing? She escaped the grip of Rudy's words and ignored the watching people at her side. Most of them were mute, statues with beating hearts, perhaps bystanders in the latter stages of a marathon. Liesel cried out again and was not heard. Hair was in her eyes. Please, Max! After perhaps 30 meters, just as the soldier turned around, the girl was felled. Hands were clamped upon her from behind, and the boy next door brought her down. He forced her knees to the road and suffered the penalty. He collected her punches as if they were presents. Her bony hands and elbows were accepted with nothing but a few short moans. He accumulated the loud, clumsy specks of saliva and tears as if they were lovely to his face. And more important, he was able to hold her down. On Munich Street, a boy and a girl were entwined. They were twisted and comfortless on the road. Together they watched the humans disappear. They watched them dissolve like moving tablets in the humid air. The next chapter is Confessions. When the Jews were gone, Rudy and Liesel untangled, and the book thief did not speak. There were no answers to Rudy's questions. Liesel did not go home either. She walked forlornly to the train station and waited for her papa for hours. Rudy stood with her for the first 20 minutes. But since it was a good half day till Hans was due home, he fetched Rosa. On the way back, he told her what had happened, and when Rosa arrived, she asked nothing of the girl. She had already assembled the puzzle and merely stood behind her and eventually convinced her to sit down. They waited together. When Papa found out, he dropped his bag. He kicked the Bahnhof air. None of them ate that night. Papa's fingers desecrated the accordion, murdering song after song, no matter how hard he tried. Everything no longer worked. For 3 days, the book thief stayed in bed. Every morning and afternoon, Rudy Steiner knocked on the door and asked if she was still sick. The girl was not sick. On the fourth day, Liesel walked to her neighbor's front door and asked if he might go back to the trees with her, where they distributed the bread the previous year. I should have told you earlier, she said. As promised, they walked far down the road toward Dachau. They stood in the trees. There were long shapes of light and shade. Pine cones were scattered like cookies. Thank you, Rudy, for everything. For helping me off the road, for stopping me. She said none of it. Her hand leaned on a flaky branch at her side. Rudy, if I tell you something, will you promise not to say a word to anyone? Of course. He could sense the seriousness of the girl's face and the heaviness in her voice. He leaned on the next tree to hers. What is it? Promise? I did already. Do it again. Can't tell your mother, your brother, or Tommy Mueller. Nobody. I promise. Leaning, looking at the ground. She attempted several times to find the right place to start, reading sentences at her feet, joining words to the pine cones and the scraps of broken branches. Remember when I was injured playing soccer? She said, out on the street. It took approximately three-quarters of an hour to explain two wars, an accordion, a Jewish fish fighter, and a basement. Not forgetting what had happened 4 days earlier on Munich Street. That's why you went for a closer look, Rudy said, with the bread that day, to see if he was there. Yes, crucified Christ. Yes. The trees were tall and triangular. They were quiet. Lisa pulled the word shaker from her bag and showed Rudy one of the pages. On it was a boy with three medals hanging around his throat. Hair the color of lemons, Rudy read. His fingers touched the words. You told him about me? At first, Lisa could not talk. Perhaps it was a sudden bumpiness of love she felt for him. Or had she always loved him? It's likely. Restricted as she was from speaking, she wanted him to kiss her. She wanted him to drag her hand across and pull her over. Didn't matter where. Her mouth, her neck, her cheek. Her skin was empty for it, waiting. Years ago, when they'd raced on a muddy field, Rudy was a hastily assembled set of bones, with a jagged, rocky smile. In the trees this afternoon, he was a giver of bread and teddy bears. He was a triple Hitler Youth athletics champion. He was your best friend. And he was a month from his death. Of course, I told you about him. I told him about you, Liesel said. She was saying goodbye, and she didn't even know it. Next chapter is Ilse Herman's Little Black Brook. In mid August, she thought she was going to 8 Grand Strasse for the same old remedy, to cheer herself up. That was what she thought. The day had been hot, but showers were predicted for the evening. In The Last Human Stranger, there was a quote near the end. Lisa was reminded of it as she walked past Frau Diller's. The Last Human Stranger, page 211. The sun stirs the earth. Around and around it stirs us, like stew. At the time, Lisa only thought of it because the day was so warm. On Munich Street, she remembered the events of the previous week there. She saw the Jews coming down the road, their streams in numbers and pain. She decided there was a word missing from her quote. The world is an ugly stew, she thought. It's so ugly I can't stand it. Liesel crossed the bridge over the Amper River. The water was glorious and emerald and rich. She could see the stones at the bottom and hear the familiar song of water. The world did not deserve such a river. She scaled up the hill to Grand Strasse. The houses were lovely and loathsome. She enjoyed the small ache in her legs and lungs. Walk harder, she thought, and she started rising. Like a monster out of the sand. She smelled the neighborhood grass. It was fresh and sweet, green and yellow tipped. She crossed the yard without a single turn of the head or the slightest pause of paranoia. The window, hands on the frame. Scissor of the legs, landing feet, books and pages in a happy place. She slid a book from the shelf and sat with it on the floor. Is she home? She wondered. But she did not care if Elsa Herman was slicing potatoes in the kitchen, or lining up at the post office, or standing ghost like over the top of her, examining what the girl was reading. The girl simply didn't care anymore. For a long time she sat and saw. She had seen her brother die with one eye open, one still in a dream. She had said goodbye to her mother and imagined her lonely wait for a train back home to oblivion. A woman of wire had laid herself down, her scream traveling the street, till it fell sideways like a rolling coin, starved of momentum. A young man was hung by a rope made of Stalingrad snow. She had watched a bomber pilot die in the metal case. She had seen a Jewish man who had twice given her the most beautiful pages of her life march to a concentration camp. At the center of it all, she saw the Fuhrer shouted his words and passed them around. Those images were the world, and it stewed in her as she sat with the lovely books and their manicured titles. It brewed in her as she eyed the pages full to the brims of their bellies with paragraphs and words. You bastards, she thought. You lovely bastards. Don't make me happy, please. Don't fill me up and let me think that something good can come of any of this. Look at my bruises. Look at this graze. Do you see the graze inside me? Do you see it growing before your very eyes, eroding me? I don't want to hope for anything anymore. I don't want to pray that Max is alive or safe, or Alex Steiner, because the world does not deserve them. She tore a page from the book and ripped it in half, then a chapter. Soon there was nothing but scraps of words littered between her legs and all around her. The words. Why do they have to exist? Without them, there wouldn't be any of this. Without words, the Fuhrer was nothing. There would be no limping prisoners, no need for consolation or worldly tricks to make us feel better. What good were the words? She said it audibly now to the orange lit room. What good are the words? The book thief stood and walked carefully to the library door. Its protest was small and half hearted. The airy hallway was steeped in wooden emptiness. Frau Herman? The question came back at her and tried for another surge to the front door. Made it only halfway, landing weakly on a couple of fat floorboards. Frau Herman. Calls were greeted with nothing but silence. She was tempted to seek out the kitchen. For Rudy, she refrained. It wouldn't have felt right to steal food from a woman who had left her a dictionary against a window pane. That, and she had also just destroyed one of her books, page by page, chapter by chapter. She'd done enough damage as it was. Lisa returned to the library and opened one of the desk drawers. She sat down. The last letter. Dear Mrs. Herman, as you can see, I have been in your library again, and I have ruined one of your books. I was just so angry and afraid, and I wanted to kill the words. I have stolen from you, and now I have wrecked your property. I'm sorry. To punish myself, I think I will stop coming here. Or is it punishment at all? I love this place, and I hate it, because it is full of words. You have been a friend to me even though I hurt you, even though I have been insufferable. A word I looked up in your dictionary. And I think I will leave you alone now. I'm sorry for everything. Thank you again, Liesel Miminger. She left the note on the desk and gave the room a last goodbye, doing 3 laps and running her hands over the titles. As much as she hated them, she couldn't resist. Flakes of torn up paper were strewn around a book called The Rules of Tommy Hoffman. In the breeze from the window, a few of its shreds rose and fell. The light was still orange, but it was not as lustrous as earlier. Her hands felt their final grip on the wooden window frame, and there was a last rush of a plunging stomach, and the pang of pain in her feet when she landed. By the time she made it down the hall and across the bridge, the orange light had vanished. Clouds were mopping up. When she walked down Himmel Street, she could already feel the first drops of rain. I will never see Elsa Herman again, she thought. But the book thief was better at reading and ruining books than making assumptions. 3 days later, the woman has knocked at number 33 and waits for a reply. It was strange for Liesel to see her without a bathrobe. The summer dress was yellow with red trim. There was a pocket with a small flower on it. No swastikas. Black shoes. Never before had she noticed Elsa Herman's shins. She had porcelain legs. Frau Herman, I'm sorry for what I did the last time in the library. The woman quieted her. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small black book. Inside was not a story, but lined paper. I thought if you were going to read any more of my books, you might like the one like to write one instead. Your letter, it was. She handed the book to Liesel with both hands. You can certainly write. You write well. The book was heavy, the cover matted like the shoulder shrug. And please, Elsa advised me, don't punish yourself like you said you would. Don't be like me, Liesel. The girl opened the book and touched the paper. Danke schön, Frau Herman. I can make you some coffee if you like. Would you come in? I'm home alone. My mom is next door with Frau Holzenfeld. Shall we use the door or the window? Lisa suspected it was the broadest smile Elsa Herman had allowed herself in years. Think we'll use the door. It's easier. They sat in the kitchen, coffee mugs and bread with jam. They struggled to speak, and Lisa could hear Elsa Herman swallow, but somehow it was not uncomfortable. It was even nice to see the woman gently blow across the coffee to cool it. If I ever write something and finish it, Lisa said, I'll show you. That would be nice. When the mayor's wife left, Lisa watched her walk up Himmel Street. She watched her yellow dress and her black shoes and her porcelain legs. At the mailbox, Rudy asked, Was that who I think it was? Yes. You're joking. She gave me a present. As it turned out, Elsa Herman not only gave Liesel Meminger a book that day, she also gave her a reason to spend time in the basement. Her favorite place, first with Papa, then Max. She gave her a reason to write her own words, to see that words had also brought her to life. Don't punish yourself, she heard her say again. But there would be punishment and pain, and there would be happiness too. That was writing. In the night, when Mama and Papa were asleep, Liesel crept down to the basement and turned on the kerosene lamp. For the first hour, she only watched the pencil and paper. She made herself remember, and, as was her habit, she did not look away. Schreibe, she instructed herself. Write. After more than 2 hours, Lisa Wimminger started writing, not knowing how she was ever going to get this right. How could she ever know that someone would pick up her story and carry it with him everywhere? No one expects these things. They don't plan them. She used a small paint can for a seat, a large one for a table, and Liesel stuck the pencil onto the first page. In the middle, she wrote the following: The Book Thief, a small story by Liesel Meminger. And we will end Thursday's reading there. And on Friday, we will come back and finish The Book Thief. Have a good day.